Hi, welcome back to Red Iris Coach. I'm Heather. Today I want to tell you a little bit about learning and development, how I got into it, and the state of it, in my opinion, in the current times. So I got into L&D in 2017 as an instructional designer. My story is unique in that I did not pursue instructional design in any way. I actually didn't even know what instructional design was. I had just gotten back to the US after teaching in Japan for 2 years, and I was working in an after school education company. So they had curriculum based um, after school activities, and it was there was an educational component. They had tech stuff, they had language stuff, they had Lego. The curriculum rotated pretty frequently, and so people were hired to work in the schools to provide after school care in the schools to the kids. And sometimes it was teachers or former teachers or current teachers who wanted extra income. Sometimes it was other people from the community who wanted to work in the after school program. So that was the first job that I found when I got back to the US. And for whatever reason, divine intervention, I'm not exactly sure how the connection was made, but because I lived in the same city as the headquarters of the company, they reached out to me and they asked me if I could help with some of their curriculum using Adobe InDesign. Yes, I think that's what it was. And I said, I don't know, I'll try. So I helped them with that. And then they're like, okay, so you can figure out tech. So why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? So they would bring me into the office every once in a while, and I would get extra hours that way. So of course I was incentivized to do that. Mind you, I had never worked in a corporate environment before. I did not know the first thing about corporate. I did not know the first thing about instructional design or how it works. No idea about the politics of it. I was just a teacher who thought it was fun to use technology to do stuff with the curriculum. So, after a few months of that, the instructional designer at the time, he said, "Well, it seems like you can do this pretty well. Why not make this a full-time situation?" So at first, it was kind of like a trial basis, like, how is this working for us? Are you able to use the tech? The first assignment I ever got as an instructional designer to become, like to be determined, was to take some PowerPoint decks and put them into Storyline and make them some training for summer camp. And I did that. And then they kept throwing things at me and I kept figuring it out. And eventually, I think what really sealed the deal was when I made a video with Camtasia, which I had never really used before, compiling some footage and some stats from that year. And it made the CFO cry. So I was like, okay, so maybe I've got some skill here. And yeah, so that's how I started working in instructional design. I was with that company for about 4 years. Then I moved into a fintech company, a big one. I will not name it, but you can probably guess, or at least, process of elimination. And then I worked at an agricultural finance company. And then I said, wow, I went from teaching to training in a corporate environment. And this is actually really fucking stressful. And there's so much politics, and people will find any excuse to not live up to the ethos that they claim is part of their company, part of the core of their company, and that's a real bummer. I have 3 degrees, and my manager still, this was at the time, not now, not my current job, but my manager at the time still doesn't take me seriously, doesn't value my ideas, and always has feedback, which is just like do it the way I would prefer you to do it. So took a pause. I took a pause on corporate. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore because it's not about how good the training looks. It's not about how good the training is. It's not about the outcomes of the training. It's just constant production, constant grind, constant misdirection and redirection as the business tries to figure out what the fuck they want. And that you have patience for that if the business is new or if there is a good reason why management is having a hard time making a decision. There's no reason to let that grind you down to nothing when they're just like that, when it's never going to get better. So I took a pause and I said, I'm done. And luckily, because I had a pretty good savings built up, I was like, I'm not buying a house. That's not the path for me. But there are things that I've really wanted to do in my life. I'm going to do one of them, and that was to get a master's degree. And of course, I didn't want to do it in the US. I wanted to do it abroad. What did I want to get a master's degree in? Well, whenever I would look at the course descriptions for the MBA programs, it made me want to scream and cry and throw up. So I knew that wasn't going to be the thing for me. So I applied to one university in Canada for an HR training program of some kind. I don't even remember the name now. It's been almost 3 years, so I don't remember the name. And then I applied to 3 universities in Ireland. Each university was a little bit different in terms of the program offerings, but basically the core was well-being in the workplace setting, or at least transferable skills for a workplace setting, and promoting well-being in some way. So one program was for health promotion, and you can definitely look into health promotion if you want. That's kind of like an Ireland, UK thing. And then one program was for, oh no, I don't remember the name. It was a long name, and it was like corporate training and corporate well-being. And then the program I ended up accepting the offer for was at the University College Cork for the Master's in Applied Psychology in Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology. In order to apply for that program, I had to do some coaching hours with a professional coach and see what I thought of that and use that experience as part of my essay. And I had never been with a coach before, never worked with a coach before, never been around a coach before, didn't know anything about coaching or the profession of coaching really, but it appealed to me because when I would look into what I thought was interesting about coaching and then compare it to what I would see in the corporate environment, I did not see coaching. I had never been coached, even though most places that I've worked have talked about how coaching is important and you should include coaching in your conversations and your one-on-ones. No one was doing that. Are you kidding? It's a list of, did you do this? Yes or no. So I was, my mind was blown because coaching was really about the other person, not just molding them and squishing them into something that the company wants. So of course that was really awesome. And I was constantly seeing like how much people were burnt out and burning out, not just because of workload, but because the culture is toxic. A lot of corporate cultures are toxic. This is no surprise to anyone. And I mean, I was on the steering committee for an LGBTQIA group, and the amount of pushback that we got for the littlest things was so disappointing and so infuriating. And then, like, even my management didn't really take it seriously that I was on this committee. So they were constantly like undermining the work that I wanted to do. And there would be like offsite meetings that I would want to go to. And the person in charge of making a decision about whether or not I could go would take so long that I wouldn't be able to go. They would never make a decision. And so that was like, a soft no. So I left corporate. I said, what the fuck? I cannot keep doing this. And so when I left corporate, I didn't know if I wanted to work in corporate again. I actually was trying to find a way to not really do any hard work ever again, which is very laughable if anyone has ever done a master's program, especially a 1-year master's program, because you work for that. You work extremely hard for that. And it's not the same kind of work as corporate work, but it is extremely intellectually, cognitively taxing. Especially if you don't have a bachelor's in the discipline that you're studying at the master's level, you're catching up to everyone who does you're still doing the same stuff, the same course load, the same assignments with the same expectations, only you are catching up on 4 years or 3 years, depending on the degree. You're catching up on that in 6 months so that you can do the same thing that everyone else is doing in terms of the assignments and the dissertation. So I left corporate because learning and development wasn't about learning or development anymore. And I just needed to step away from it. So during that program, I learned not only everything there is that I could learn in 1 year about coaching psychology and positive psychology, but also about my opinions and the types of insight I can offer based on my now 9 years of experience in learning and development and instructional design. So when people would talk about HR or wanting to get into learning and development, I was the know-it-all in the class because that was in my wheelhouse. That was my thing. So, I mean, I didn't want to necessarily go back to instructional design because of the chances of corporate being toxic. But I came back to the States. I was working on my dissertation. I had like this much brain space available to know that I needed to find work again and to try to find it. So I did end up finding another job in learning and development, and it is much different than the typical learning and development job. So here's something that I think is really important for you to know if you are interested in instructional design and you don't know where to start. I have worked with people who have never edited a video before and probably never will. I have worked with people who had never touched Articulate Rise before and then made a course with a little bit of guidance from me. You do not have to know every single little thing. You don't have to have a tech stack that costs you $3,000 a year to maintain in order to be a good instructional designer. And you don't need a portfolio if the job doesn't ask for one. So if you come across someone who is dogmatically telling you that you have to have a portfolio, they are not They are misinformed because 3 out of the 4 jobs I have ever gotten in instructional design, I did not have a portfolio for. I just want you to sit with that because it's something that has gotten me in trouble on LinkedIn, saying that you don't need a portfolio. People come for you. But why would I lie to you? Why would I lie about that? Why would I make it up? That doesn't make sense, does it? So, yes, the work that I do now is 80% writing, and that is the core of our instructional design. And I think that it's important to understand that there is a diverse possibility, a diverse spectrum of different types of jobs that could fall under the instructional design umbrella, but be called something else. And there's no need to get bogged down in titles. What matters most, and this is coming from someone with, again, nearly a decade of experience in instructional design, what matters most is what you are good at and what you want to do. If you already have experience, work experience, you are not an entry-level professional. You have transferable skills. And anyone who is already curious about tech and curious about instruction and design, like a teacher, for example, it's much easier for them to transfer into instructional design and hit the ground running. So that is something that's really important to get the word out on. You might come across that a lot on LinkedIn, but in the places and spaces where they're trying to sell you a course on how to make an e-learning course, they're not going to tell you that. But it's important to know. It's really important to know. I need people to stop being fucking crazy and weird about an industry that is kind of silly. Like, why is it silly? Because a lot of businesses make it silly. Because it's not about people learning stuff to become better at their job. It's about a whole bunch of other things that don't make any sense. But at the core of it is we're a bunch of nerds who made a thing that we want you to look at because it might help you with your job. Either be better at your job or have information that will help you with your job. That's it. That's really the core of it. And all we're trying to do is make sure that you can retain that information. Anything that is not human focused, so you didn't interact with a human, nobody showed you any hands-on thing, you never saw a person talking, that's not training, that's a study guide, honey, okay? It's really important to be realistic and live in reality about what some of these things are. And me stepping away from it, seeing some of the spectacle of it, and then coming back into it in a place that has a much more grounded perspective on it, which is the only place that I can work in now because otherwise it drives me insane and I cannot function. If you are interested in working in instructional design or you work in instructional design, destructional design, that's what it feels like sometimes in some companies. You know what I'm talking about. So that's a little bit of a ramble on how I ended up in instructional design and the state of instructional design in terms of like, what is realistic? Again, what is realistic? What is reality? What is an anecdotal perspective on what instructional design is and what's happening in instructional design? One, you don't need a portfolio if the job description doesn't ask for a portfolio. 2, there are a lot of things that people tell you you need to have, and that is extremely case by case basis because the company you end up working for will probably train you on something that you never heard of, or you'll be using it in a way that only that company uses it. 3, a lot of companies say that they develop their employees, but they just give you something to look at until it's finished and call it training. 4, job descriptions give you a really good understanding and insight into how much time and how mature the organization is, so how much time they actually spend on the job description and making sure it makes sense and is accurate. 5, you're allowed to be discerning. If the job description says most of this job is going to be writing, and that sounds good to you, who cares about your tech stack? Just go do the writing. If the job description says most of this is going to be AI and you hate working with AI, don't apply to that job. Sure, the job market is weird right now, but there's no reason to put yourself in a position where you're going to want to quit anyway. I have a lot of I have a lot of opinions and thoughts and feelings about this because I think we could all be doing better and have a better experience and not be subjecting the learners to a horrible, dumb, like pointless waste of their time and call it training. We can make meaningful, socially centered, people centered learning experiences, and everyone will be better off for it and enjoy the training more and be better at their jobs and have a better time at work. So that is my soapbox for today. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.